They told me humans were dangerous. They told me their touch could contaminate, their presence could corrupt, their very existence threatened everything we had built over 10,000 years. But as I watched my daughter take her last breath in the sterile white chamber, I realized the most dangerous thing in the universe wasn't humanity. It was hope. My name is Ashira Valkorian, Queen Regent of the 7th Celestial Dynasty, Guardian of the Crystal Nebula, and mother to the last heir of our bloodline. And I was about to break every law our civilization had ever written. The medical scanner's rhythmic pulse had become a death march. Each beat marked another second my infant daughter, Lyra, slipped further from me. Her silver skin, once radiant with the bioluminescence that marked our royal heritage, had faded to a dull gray. The 4 physicians surrounding her incubation pod had stopped making eye contact with me 3 hours ago. That's when I knew traditional medicine had failed. Your Majesty, High Physician Torek's voice cracked, the first emotion I'd heard from him in 20 years of service. The cellular degradation is accelerating. Her neural pathways are. Forgive me. She has perhaps 6 hours, maybe less. 6 hours. My daughter had existed in this universe for exactly 42 days, and in 6 hours she would cease to exist entirely. The fading, they called it. A genetic defect that had appeared in our bloodline 3 generations ago, killing every royal child before their first year. My older sister, my 3 cousins, my own son 5 years ago. Lyra was supposed to be different. We'd tried every experimental treatment, consulted with bioengineers from 12 different star systems, even attempted forbidden genetic modifications that cost me my position on the High Council. Nothing worked. The fading always won. I placed my hand against the incubation pod's transparent surface, feeling the cool hum of the life support systems beneath my palm. Inside, Lyra's tiny chest rose and fell with mechanical precision, aided by machines that breathed for her, pumped her blood, filtered her organs. She was more apparatus than child now, and still she was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. There must be something, I whispered. Somewhere in this galaxy, there must be something we haven't tried. The silence that followed was answer enough. We had tried everything, or so I thought. Actually, Your Majesty. The voice came from the corner of the medical bay, where a junior research assistant named Veltara had been monitoring data streams. She was young, barely 300 years old, with the kind of naive optimism that hadn't yet been crushed by reality. There might be. No, forgive me. It's impossible. I turned to her, and something in my expression made her shrink back. Speak. The human research. She pulled up a holographic display with trembling hands. 6 months ago, the Science Directorate commissioned a study on human biological compatibility. It was meant to assess the threat level of their expanding presence in our sector. But the researchers discovered something unexpected. The hologram showed molecular structures I didn't fully understand, but I recognized the spiral pattern of our DNA alongside the strange double helix of human genetics. What am I looking at? Human DNA contains something called adaptive immunity, Veltara explained, her confidence growing as she spoke. Their genetic code is chaotic compared to ours, mutations, variations, constant evolution. We bred those traits out of our species millennia ago in pursuit of perfection. But that chaos, it might be exactly what Princess Lyra needs. High Physician Torek made a sound of disgust. You're suggesting we introduce human contamination into the royal bloodline. That's not just illegal, it's biological suicide. Human DNA is incompatible with ours. The princess would reject it within seconds. Unless she doesn't, Veltara countered. The fading occurs because our genetic code has become too rigid, too perfect. It can't adapt to cellular stress, but human DNA is designed to adapt. If we could introduce it to the princess's system in a controlled manner, it might give her immune response the flexibility it needs to fight the fading. It's theoretical nonsense, Torek snapped. The study was never completed. The researchers were arrested for unauthorized contact with human subjects. Their data was classified and— I want to see it, I interrupted. All of it, every piece of data from that study. Torek's silver eyes widened. Your Majesty, I cannot allow. I am not asking your permission, High Physician. My voice carried the weight of 3 centuries of rule. My daughter is dying. If there is even the smallest chance that human science can save her, I will take it. Now bring me the data, or I will find someone who will. The silence that followed was absolute. Finally, Torek bowed his head in submission. As you command, Your Majesty. It took them 47 minutes to retrieve the classified files. 47 minutes while I watched my daughter's life signs weaken, her small body fighting a battle it could never win. When the data finally appeared on the holographic display, I absorbed every detail with desperate intensity. The study had involved 12 test subjects, 6 of our species, 6 humans. The researchers had attempted to map genetic compatibility through controlled exposure experiments. Most had failed catastrophically. Human and celestial physiology were too different, the cellular rejection too violent. But in one case, something remarkable had occurred. A human scientist had accidentally cut his hand in the laboratory. His blood had come into contact with a celestial tissue sample affected by a degenerative disease similar to the fading. Instead of rejection, the human blood cells had essentially taught the celestial cells how to repair themselves. The damaged tissue had regenerated completely within hours. The researchers had tried to replicate the results intentionally, but they couldn't. The effect only occurred with direct contact, skin to skin, blood to blood, and only when the human subject was in close proximity for an extended period. They theorized it had something to do with biochemical signals transmitted through touch, an exchange of cellular information that couldn't be synthesized or replicated artificially. This is insane, Torek said, reading over my shoulder. Even if the theory is sound, we would need a human willing to undergo extensive medical procedures, someone who could be trusted with the royal secret, someone who has nothing to lose, I finished. Someone who would agree to this in exchange for something they desperately want. I thought about the humans I had encountered during diplomatic missions. They were shorter than us, their lifespans tragically brief, their technology crude. But they possessed something we had lost in our pursuit of genetic perfection. They were fighters, survivors. Their entire species had clawed its way up from a disaster-prone planet to spread across the stars through sheer stubborn resilience. If anyone could teach my daughter's cells how to fight, it would be one of them. Contact the human embassy, I ordered. Tell them Queen Ashira Valkorian requests an immediate audience with their chief medical officer. Tell them it's a matter of life and death. The human who arrived 6 hours later was not what I expected. I had pictured one of their military physicians, older, experienced, hardened by years of service. Instead, they sent me Dr. Marcus Webb, a xenobiologist barely into his 30s by human standards. He was tall for his species, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of Earth's oceans, a deep, unsettling blue. He stood in my throne room looking simultaneously awed and terrified, as humans often did when confronted with celestial architecture. Our palace was carved from living crystal that had grown over millennia, refracting light in ways that created perpetual aurora displays across every surface. To human eyes, it must have seemed like stepping into a frozen rainbow. Dr. Webb, I addressed him from my throne, keeping my voice neutral despite the urgency screaming through my veins. Thank you for responding to my summons so quickly. He bowed awkwardly. Humans never quite mastered celestial etiquette. Your Majesty, I came as soon as I received the message. Though I confess I'm not sure why you've asked for me specifically. I'm just a research scientist. Surely your own physicians are out of options, I interrupted, which is why I'm turning to you, Doctor. Webb, how much do you know about the fading? His expression shifted, surprise giving way to something like recognition. The genetic disorder affecting celestial royal bloodlines. I've read the published medical literature, but most of the research is classified. Are you saying? My daughter is dying from it. The words came out harder than I intended. She has perhaps 12 hours left, maybe less. And I have reason to believe that human biology may hold the key to saving her life. I watched his face carefully as I explained the theory. The adaptive immunity, the cellular communication, the accidental discovery. He listened with the intensity of someone trained to absorb complex information quickly, occasionally asking questions that revealed a deeper understanding of celestial physiology than I had anticipated. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised me. "You're not just asking me to consult on this case. You're asking me to be the donor." "Yes, because direct contact is necessary, prolonged exposure. Skin to skin, possibly for weeks or months. You need someone who can essentially merge their immune system with hers temporarily." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I would come to recognize as his thinking tell. "Your Majesty, I need to be honest with you. This is completely experimental. There's no guarantee it will work. In fact, there's a significant chance it could kill her faster. I'm aware of the risks. And there are personal risks too. If this works, if we establish the kind of biological connection the theory suggests, it could have lasting effects on both of us. Changes to my DNA, possible dependency issues, immunological complications we can't predict. I could end up permanently bonded to your daughter on a cellular level." "I understand." I leaned forward, letting him see the desperation I had been hiding from my court. "Dr. Webb, I am asking you to save my child's life. Whatever the cost, whatever the consequences, I will pay them. Name your price." He looked at me with those strange blue eyes, and I saw something in them I hadn't expected: empathy. Not pity, not calculation, but genuine understanding of what it meant to watch someone you love slip away while you stood helpless. "I don't want payment," he said quietly, "but I do have one condition. If I do this, if I potentially bind my biology to Princess Lyra's for the rest of our lives, then I need to be sure this isn't just about preserving a royal bloodline. I need to know that she'll grow up in a world where human celestial cooperation is possible, where my sacrifice means something beyond just continuing a dynasty." I stared at him, caught off guard by his audacity. A human making political demands of a celestial queen. It should have been insulting. Instead, I found myself impressed. "You want me to advocate for closer human-celestial relations," I said, "to use my influence to break down the barriers between our species. I want you to raise your daughter to believe that humans aren't the enemy, that we're potential allies, maybe even friends." He smiled slightly. "If I'm going to be biologically connected to your heir, I'd prefer she didn't grow up thinking I'm some kind of contamination." Despite everything, I almost laughed. "You drive a hard bargain, Dr. Webb. I learned from the best. Humans have to be good negotiators. We're usually at a disadvantage." He straightened his shoulders. "So, Your Majesty, do we have an agreement?" I should have consulted with my advisors, should have brought this before the High Council, should have followed protocol and procedure and all the careful diplomatic steps that had governed celestial-human relations for the past 50 years. Instead, I stood from my throne and descended the steps to stand before him. He was taller than me, most humans were, but in that moment I felt like I towered over him with the weight of my desperation and hope. "We have an agreement," I said. "Save my daughter, Dr. Webb. Help me give her a future. And I swear to you, on my crown and my honor, that future will include your people as equals." He extended his hand, a human gesture of agreement. I took it, feeling the warmth of his skin against mine, such a strange sensation. Celestials ran cool, our body temperature regulated by internal crystalline structures. But humans were warm, almost feverishly so. His pulse beat rapidly under my fingers, so much faster than ours. This was the man I was entrusting with my daughter's life. This warm, fast-beating, impossibly brave human. "When do we start?" he asked. "Now." The medical bay had been cleared of everyone, except Torek and Veltara. I wasn't ready to let the rest of my court know what I was attempting. If this failed, when word got out that I had allowed human contamination of the royal bloodline, the political fallout would be catastrophic. But I had made my choice. I would deal with the consequences later. If there was a later. Dr. Webb approached Lyra's incubation pod with the careful respect of someone who understood what it meant to stand in the presence of a dying child. He placed his hands on the transparent surface where mine had rested so many times, looking down at her tiny gray form. "She's beautiful," he said softly. "She looks like you, around the eyes." Something in my chest tightened. Her father said the same thing, before he died. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," he gave me Lyra, "that's all that matters now." I moved to stand beside him. "Dr. Webb, I need you to understand something. If this doesn't work, if she dies anyway, I don't blame you. You're taking a risk no one else was willing to take. Whatever happens, you have my gratitude." He glanced at me and I saw fear in his eyes. Good. Fear meant he understood the gravity of what we were attempting. Fear meant he would be careful. "Let's make sure we don't need gratitude for a failed attempt," he said. "Let's make this work." Torek had prepared the protocols based on the classified research. They would begin by introducing Dr. Webb's blood plasma to Lyra's system in controlled microdoses, monitoring for rejection. If her body accepted it, they would progress to direct physical contact, skin to skin, allowing their bodies to communicate on a cellular level. The theory was sound. The execution was terrifying. The first plasma transfusion made Lyra's vital signs spike. Her tiny body convulsed in the incubation pod, alarms shrieking as her immune system recognized the foreign material and tried to fight it. I watched in horror as her already gray skin took on a bluish tinge, her breathing becoming labored even with mechanical assistance. "Stop," I commanded. "Stop the transfusion now." "Wait, doctor," Webb said, his eyes fixed on the biometric displays. "Look at her neural activity. It's increasing, not decreasing. Her brain is processing the new information. Give it 30 more seconds." "Doctor, her oxygen saturation is dropping." "30 seconds, please." I wanted to override him, wanted to rip my daughter from that pod and hold her close, protect her from this insane experiment. But I had chosen this path. I had chosen to trust him. 20 seconds, 25, 30. And then, impossibly, the alarms began to quiet. Lyra's convulsions eased, her oxygen levels stabilized. And her skin began to show the faintest hint of luminescence. "It's working," Veltara breathed. "Her cells are accepting the human antibodies. They're integrating them into her immune response." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Could only stare at my daughter as color slowly returned to her tiny face. Dr. Webb was already moving. "We need to establish direct contact while her system is receptive. If we wait too long, the window might close." Torek opened the incubation pod, and for the first time in days, I saw my daughter without the barrier of medical technology between us. She looked so fragile, so impossibly small. Her eyes were closed, her breathing steady but shallow. Dr. Webb removed his gloves and gently placed his bare hand on Lyra's chest. Nothing happened for a moment. Then Lyra's eyes snapped open. They were the traditional silver of our royal line, but around the edges, I could swear I saw flecks of that strange human blue. She looked up at Dr. Webb with the unfocused gaze of an infant, and then she did something she hadn't done since the day she was born. She smiled, not the random muscle twitch of a newborn, but a real smile, a response to his touch. And as she smiled, her bioluminescence flared brighter than I had ever seen it, patterns of light dancing across her skin like living constellations. "Hello there, little one," Dr. Webb whispered. "I'm Marcus, and I'm going to help you get better." Lyra wrapped her tiny fingers around his thumb, a grip that was weak but unmistakably intentional. And in that moment I saw something on the biometric displays that made my breath catch. Her cellular degradation had stopped, not slowed, stopped completely. By the ancestors, Torek muttered. It's actually working. But Dr. Webb wasn't celebrating. His eyes had gone distant, his expression shifting from wonder to something like shock. I can feel her, he said quietly. I can feel her immune system talking to mine. It's like there's a conversation happening at a molecular level. She's teaching my cells about celestial biology, and I'm teaching hers about human adaptation. Is it painful? I asked, concerned by the strange look on his face. No, it's beautiful, overwhelming but beautiful. He looked at me and his eyes were filled with tears. Your Majesty, your daughter is magnificent. Her biology is the most elegant thing I've ever encountered, and she's fighting so hard to live. I can feel it, she wants to survive. I moved closer, placing my hand beside his on Lyra's chest. And there, in the warmth radiating from his palm, I felt it too. A pulse of communication, of connection, of life asserting itself against the void. My daughter was going to live. The next 72 hours were the longest of my life. Dr. Webb remained in constant contact with Lyra, taking brief breaks only when absolutely necessary. He slept in a chair beside her incubation pod, ate meals with one hand while the other rested on her small form, spoke to her constantly in that soft human voice that seemed to soothe her in ways our traditional celestial lullabies never had. And with each hour that passed, she grew stronger. Her bioluminescence returned to full radiance. Her organs began functioning without mechanical assistance. Her neural pathways developed at rates that astonished our physicians. By the end of the third day, Torek pronounced her completely stable, not cured, not yet, but stable enough that she was no longer in immediate danger. I finally allowed myself to sleep, collapsing in my private chambers for the first time since this ordeal began. When I woke 8 hours later and rushed back to the medical bay, I found Dr. Webb sitting cross-legged on the floor beside Lyra's pod, reading to her from a human data tablet. It's an Earth story called Where the Wild Things Are, he explained when he noticed me. My mother used to read it to me. I thought Lyra might like it. The rhythm of the language seems to keep her calm. I listened as he read, his voice rising and falling with the cadence of the narrative. Lyra watched him with those silver-blue eyes, her small hand pressed against the inside of the pod where his rested on the outside. They were connected, I realized, not just biologically but emotionally. In 3 days, this human had become essential to my daughter's existence, and perhaps to mine as well. Dr. Webb, I said when he finished the story. Marcus, may I speak with you privately? He glanced at Lyra, reluctant to break contact even for a moment. But Veltara stepped forward, offering to monitor the princess while we talked. Reluctantly, he agreed, though I noticed he kept glancing back at the pod as we walked to my private office adjacent to the medical bay. How are you feeling? I asked once we were alone. Truly. I know you said the connection wasn't painful, but you've been maintaining it almost constantly for days. There must be side effects. He leaned against the wall, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. I'm tired, really tired. It's like my immune system is running a marathon 24 hours a day. But it's working, Ashira. She's responding. Every hour, her cells get a little better at replicating the adaptive patterns. Eventually, she won't need me anymore. Her own biology will have learned enough to sustain itself. I noticed he had used my name instead of my title. Under normal circumstances, such informality would be inappropriate. But nothing about this situation was normal. How long, I asked, until she can survive without you? Hard to say, weeks, maybe months. The cellular learning process is exponential, but celestial biology is complex. We can't rush it. He met my eyes. Why? Are you concerned about the political implications? I understand if you need me to be discreet about my involvement. I'm concerned about you, I said, surprising both of us. You've sacrificed your own health, your own comfort, to save a child you'd never met. You're bonded to her now in ways we don't fully understand. What happens to you when this is over? Do you just return to your embassy and pretend this never happened?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What do you want to happen?" The question hung between us, laden with implications I wasn't ready to examine. What did I want? I wanted my daughter to live. I wanted this impossible human who had saved her to be happy. I wanted to understand the strange connection I felt growing between us, between all three of us. "I want you to stay," I admitted. "Not as a prisoner or an obligation, but as, I don't know what to call it, Lyra's guardian, her biological anchor, her friend," Marcus finished. "I'd like to be her friend if that's allowed." I found myself smiling, something I hadn't done since before Lyra got sick. "I think I can arrange that." We returned to the medical bay to find Lyra fussing, her small face scrunched in infant distress. The moment Marcus placed his hand back on her, she calmed, her bioluminescence pulsing in what I had learned to recognize as contentment. "She missed you," I observed. "The feeling is mutual, Princess," Marcus murmured to her. Then to me, "Is it strange that I feel protective of her? I've only known her a few days, but the idea of anything happening to her makes you feel like your heart is being torn from your chest," I supplied. "That's called being a parent, or close enough." He looked startled. "I'm not trying to They won't like that." "No, they won't." I smiled grimly. "But I am still queen, and I will not hide what we've accomplished here. Your people deserve recognition for what you've done. Lyra deserves to grow up knowing the truth about how she survived." Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching as Lyra's eyes began to drift closed, her bioluminescence softening to a gentle nighttime glow. Then he said, "What about what you deserve, Ashira?" I turned to him, confused. "What do you mean?" "You've been carrying this burden alone. The pressure of the crown, the grief of watching your daughter die, the weight of making impossible choices. You saved her just as much as I did, maybe more. You were willing to break every rule, risk everything to give her a chance at life." He met my eyes. "When do you get to rest?" No one had asked me that in. I couldn't remember how long. Queens didn't rest. Queens carried burdens and made sacrifices and stood strong while everything around them crumbled. That was the role. That was the duty. But looking at this human who had given so much, who saw me not as a monarch but as a person, I felt something inside me crack open. Something I had kept locked away since my husband died, since my son died, since I realized I might lose Lyra too. "I don't know," I whispered. Marcus reached out slowly, giving me time to refuse, and gently took my hand. The same gesture we had made in the throne room all those weeks ago, but different now. Not a bargain, not a transaction, just connection. "Then let me help with that too," he said softly, "if you'll let me." I looked down at our joined hands. Celestial silver and human tan, cold crystal and warm flesh. Two species that should have been incompatible but somehow fit together perfectly. Then I looked at my daughter sleeping peacefully in her cradle, alive and whole and luminous. "Yes," I said, "I think I will." The High Council meeting 3 days later was every bit as contentious as I expected. They called Marcus's involvement a contamination. They called my decision reckless. They demanded that all records of the treatment be sealed, that Dr. Webb be returned to the human embassy with a generous payment and a strict non-disclosure agreement, that we pretend this entire incident never happened. I listened to their arguments with the patience of someone who had already won. When they finished, I stood and gestured for Marcus to join me on the council floor. He had been waiting in an antechamber, and he entered now with his head held high despite the hostile stares of the assembled celestial elite. "Counselors," I said, my voice carrying across the crystal chamber, "you want me to hide the truth, to bury the evidence that human science saved the heir to our throne, but I refuse. Doctor. Marcus Webb saved my daughter's life when every celestial physician had given up hope. He risked his own health and safety to forge a biological connection with the princess. He asked for nothing in return, except that we treat his people with the respect they deserve. I placed my hand on Marcus's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that made several counselors gasp. I am declaring Dr. Webb the royal biological guardian to Princess Lyra Valkorian. He will maintain his position in the palace, with full access to the royal family and all privileges of a high-ranking court official. Furthermore, I am proposing the establishment of a human celestial medical exchange program to be directed by Dr. Webb, to explore further potential applications of combined human and celestial biological research. The chamber erupted in protest. Voices overlapped, accusations flew, ancient prejudices bubbled to the surface. But I stood firm, Marcus beside me, and waited for the chaos to subside. Finally, Elder Counselor Morath, the oldest and most traditional member of the council, raised his hand for silence. Your Majesty, he said, his voice heavy with disapproval, what you propose is unprecedented. It flies in the face of 10,000 years of celestial isolation and purity. If we accept humans into our medical institutions, into our royal household, where does it end? Will we start interbreeding with them next, diluting our heritage until we are unrecognizable? I was about to respond when Marcus stepped forward. I tensed, worried he might say something that would make the situation worse. But when he spoke, his voice was calm and measured. Elder Counselor, he said, I understand your concerns. Change is frightening, especially when it challenges beliefs held for millennia. But consider this, your genetic purity has become a genetic prison. The fading exists because your DNA has nowhere left to evolve. You've perfected yourselves into a corner. He gestured to the holographic displays still showing Lyra's medical data. What I gave Princess Lyra wasn't contamination. It was possibility, the chance for her cells to remember how to adapt, how to change, how to survive. Yes, her DNA now carries traces of human genetic markers, but those markers saved her life. They gave her a future. Morath's expression remained stony, but I saw other counselors exchanging uncertain glances. Marcus continued, You're afraid of losing your identity. I understand that, but identity isn't about genetic purity. It's about culture, values, and the choices we make. Princess Lyra will grow up celestial in every way that matters, raised in your traditions, educated in your history, prepared for her role as heir. The only difference is that she'll also carry a reminder that sometimes survival means being willing to change. The chamber was silent. Then, surprisingly, Counselor Velsarin, one of the younger members, spoke up. The human makes a compelling argument, and we cannot deny the evidence before us. The princess lives. Perhaps that should be enough. Slowly, reluctantly, the council began to shift. Not all of them, Morath and several others, remained firmly opposed, but enough. Enough to allow my proposal to move forward. Enough to begin changing the rigid isolation that had defined celestial culture for so long. As we left the council chamber, Marcus let out a long breath. That was even worse than I expected. You were brilliant, I told him. The way you addressed their fears while standing your ground, that took courage. Or stupidity. With these things, it's often hard to tell the difference. He smiled. So, Royal Biological Guardian, that's quite a title. You've earned it. Besides, I want you close. Lyra needs you, and I hesitated, then decided to be honest. And I find I've grown accustomed to your presence as well. His smile softened into something warmer. The feeling is mutual, Your Majesty. Ashira, I corrected. When we're in private, please call me Ashira. Ashira, he repeated, and I loved the way my name sounded in his warm human voice. 6 months passed. Lyra grew stronger every day, her development accelerating beyond anything we had predicted. By the time she reached 1 year old, A milestone no fading victim had ever achieved. She was not only healthy but extraordinary. Her bioluminescence could shift colors based on her emotions. Her neural pathways showed unprecedented complexity. She was learning to speak both Celestial and English simultaneously, her hybrid biology apparently giving her enhanced linguistic capabilities. And through it all, Marcus was there. Not just as her medical guardian, but as her friend, her teacher, her protector. He taught her human songs and told her Earth stories. He showed her holographic images of his homeworld and explained the strange concept of seasons, of weather that changed, of oceans that moved with tides. I watched them together and felt something growing in my heart that I hadn't expected to feel again. Not just gratitude, not just respect, something deeper, something that made me look forward to our daily briefings, that made me smile when I heard his laugh, that made me ache when he had to return to his quarters at night. One evening, after we had put Lyra to bed, she had started calling him Uncle Marcus, which made him absurdly happy. We stood together on my private balcony overlooking the crystal gardens. The twin moons were rising, casting silver light across the bioluminescent flowers that bloomed only at night. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for everything you've done, for Lyra, for me, for our species." Marcus leaned against the balcony rail, his profile highlighted by moonlight. "You don't need to keep thanking me, Ashira. This stopped being just a medical case months ago. Lyra is. She's important to me. And so are you." My heart stuttered. "Marcus." He turned to face me fully. "I know this is complicated. I know there are political implications and cultural barriers, and probably a dozen reasons why what I'm feeling is inappropriate. But I can't keep pretending I'm here just for Lyra anymore. I'm here for you too." The words hung between us like the bioluminescent particles that drifted through the night air. I should have stepped back. Should have reminded him of protocol, of the impossibility of what he was suggesting. Should have been the queen I was trained to be. Instead, I reached out and took his hand. "I know," I whispered. "I feel it too. This connection between us. It started with Lyra, but it's become something more. Something I didn't expect and don't entirely understand." "Does it scare you?" he asked softly. "Terrifies me," I admitted. "I've lost so much, Marcus. My husband, my son, nearly Lyra. The idea of opening my heart again, especially to someone whose lifespan is so much shorter than mine, someone from a species we barely understand." I shook my head. "Yes, it terrifies me. But," he prompted, stepping closer, "but you saved my daughter. You challenged my entire worldview. You made me laugh again when I thought I'd forgotten how." I looked up at him, at those impossibly blue eyes that had become so dear to me. "You made me remember that being queen doesn't mean being alone." Marcus raised his free hand slowly, giving me every chance to refuse, and gently cupped my face. His palm was warm against my cool skin, that fundamental difference between our species that somehow felt like completion rather than contrast. "I don't know what the future holds," he said. "I don't know how we navigate the politics or the cultural differences or any of the practical complications. But I know that when I'm with you, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I hope, you feel the same way." I did. Ancestors helped me, I did. I closed the distance between us and kissed him. It was strange and wonderful and nothing like kissing another celestial. He was warm and soft where we were cool and angular. His heartbeat raced beneath my palm where ours beat slow and steady. Even the way he responded was different, eager and emotional rather than the controlled passion I was accustomed to. It was perfect. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were breathing hard. Marcus laughed, a sound of pure joy that made my bioluminescence flare brighter. "I've wanted to do that for months." "I know," I said, smiling. "I could tell. Humans are not subtle with their emotions. And celestials are." He raised an eyebrow. "Ashira, your skin literally glows brighter when you're happy. That's not exactly subtle either." I laughed, actually laughed, and realized how rare that sound had become before he entered my life. Fair point. We stood there in the moonlight, holding each other, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel hope. Not just for Lyra's survival, but for something more, for a future that included this impossible, wonderful human who had changed everything. The council will have opinions, I said eventually, when they find out about this. Let them, Marcus replied. We've already broken half their rules, what's a few more? Marcus Webb, are you encouraging your queen to be rebellious? Absolutely, I think it's good for you. He kissed my forehead. Besides, someone has to teach Lyra that rules are meant to be questioned. Might as well be us. Over the following months, our relationship deepened. We were careful at first, keeping our feelings private, but eventually, the truth became impossible to hide. The way we looked at each other, the casual touches, the shared smiles, the court noticed. The council noticed. The entire palace noticed. And surprisingly, most of them accepted it. Perhaps because they had watched Marcus save Lyra. Perhaps because they saw how happy we were together. Or perhaps because change, once started, is hard to stop. Lyra, now 18 months old and thriving beyond all predictions, seemed delighted by the development. She would toddle between us, demanding to hold both our hands, her silver blue eyes sparkling with mischief. She was learning that her family was different from other celestial families, and she loved it. Mama glows when Uncle Marcus comes, she announced one day with the blunt honesty of a toddler. Does that mean he makes you happy? I glanced at Marcus, who was trying not to laugh. Yes, little star, he makes me very happy. Good, Lyra declared. He should stay forever then. I like that plan, Marcus said, scooping her up and spinning her around until she shrieked with delight. Her bioluminescence flashed rainbow colors, a hybrid trait that no pure celestial had ever displayed. She was unique, beautiful, and alive. Everything I had fought for, everything we had built together. That evening, after Lyra was asleep, Marcus and I sat in my private quarters reviewing reports from the Human Celestial Medical Exchange Program. The initiative had been more successful than even I had dared hope. Researchers from both species were collaborating on treatments for diseases that had plagued both our peoples. The genetic barriers we thought were insurmountable were falling away as we learned to combine our strengths rather than focusing on our differences. We're getting requests from other royal houses, Marcus said, scrolling through the data. 3 different families with children suffering from genetic disorders. They want to try the treatment protocol we developed with Lyra. What do you recommend? I asked, though I already knew his answer. We share it, all of it. No patents, no restrictions. This is too important to keep locked away. He looked at me. Though I should warn you, if this becomes widespread, there will be more human-celestial biological bonds, more mixing of our species. The celestial genetic line will change permanently. Good, I said firmly. Evolution requires change. We forgot that in our pursuit of perfection, you reminded us. Marcus set aside the reports and pulled me close. You know, when I first came to your throne room that day, I thought I was just consulting on a medical case. I never imagined I'd end up here, in love with a queen, helping raise a princess, changing the course of 2 civilizations. Disappointed, I teased. Are you kidding? This is way better than the alternative. He kissed the top of my head, though I do have one question. What? When are you going to make an honest man out of me? I pulled back to look at him. What? His expression was serious now, nervous but determined. Ashira Valkorian, Queen Regent of the 7th Celestial Dynasty, Guardian of the Crystal Nebula, and the woman I love more than anything in this universe. Will you marry me? My breath caught. Marriage between celestials and humans was, well, it wasn't technically illegal because no one had ever thought to make a law about it. It would be unprecedented, scandalous, revolutionary. Yes, I said without hesitation. Yes, absolutely yes. His smile could have lit up the night sky. Really? Just like that? No concerns about the political ramifications or cultural implications or... I kissed him silent. When I pulled back, I was smiling too. Marcus, you taught me that sometimes the most important thing isn't following the rules, it's following your heart. My heart chose you months ago. The rest is just details. Important details, he pointed out. Your council is going to lose their minds. Let them, I echoed his words from our first kiss. We've already changed their world. Might as well finish the job properly. The announcement of our engagement sent shockwaves through celestial society. Some celebrated it as a new era of cooperation. Others condemned it as the final degradation of our species. But I weathered the storm the same way I had weathered everything else, with Marcus beside me and Lyra between us. The wedding ceremony, held 6 months later, blended celestial and human traditions in ways that would have been unthinkable just 2 years earlier. We spoke our vows in both languages. Lyra served as our flower girl, scattering bioluminescent petals that Marcus had genetically engineered to glow in rainbow colors like her skin. Representatives from a dozen species attended, witnessing history being made. As we stood before the assembled crowd, our hands joined, I looked out at the sea of faces, celestial silver and human tan, old prejudices and new possibilities, fear and hope all mingled together. 2 years ago, I said, my voice carrying across the crystal cathedral, I stood in a medical bay watching my daughter die. I had exhausted every option, broken every rule, and still, it wasn't enough. Then a human scientist walked into my throne room and offered me something I thought I'd lost forever: hope. I turned to Marcus, seeing the love in his eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand in mine. He saved my daughter. He changed my world. He showed me that the barriers between our species existed only because we chose to maintain them. And when we chose to break them down instead, we discovered something incredible. We're better together than we ever were apart. Marcus squeezed my hand and I continued. Today, I don't just marry a human. I marry my partner, my friend, my greatest ally. And I do so with the hope that our union will serve as a symbol, that cooperation is possible, that change is survival, that love transcends species. The ceremony concluded with a tradition from both our cultures. A crystalline ring for me, a simple gold band for him, and a promise that we would face whatever came next together. As we walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, Lyra ran to keep up with us, her small hand grabbing both of ours. We're a family now, she announced proudly to anyone who would listen. A special family. She was right. We were special, not because we were perfect, but because we had been willing to be imperfect together. To change, to adapt, to grow. That night, standing on our balcony overlooking the crystal gardens with Lyra asleep in her nursery and Marcus's arm around my waist, I reflected on how much had transformed. The daughter I thought I would lose was thriving. The species I thought were incompatible were learning to work together. The heart I thought was too broken to love again had found someone worth the risk. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked softly. "That I'm grateful," I said. "For your courage that first day, for your stubbornness in the medical bay, for your love ever since." I leaned into him, feeling his warmth seep into my crystalline bones. "You saved more than Lyra's life, Marcus. You saved mine too." "We saved each other," he corrected gently. "You gave me purpose, family, a home. You taught me that being different doesn't mean being incompatible. And you loved me despite every reason not to." "Not despite," I corrected. "Because I loved you because you were different, because you challenged me, because you showed me that the future doesn't have to look like the past." Lyra stirred in her sleep and I heard her murmur through the monitor. Both Marcus and I automatically started toward the nursery, then laughed when we realized we'd moved in perfect sync. "Together?" he asked. "Always," I promised. We walked hand in hand to check on our daughter, our miracle, our bridge between worlds, our proof that impossible things can happen when you're brave enough to try. She was sleeping peacefully, her bioluminescence pulsing in gentle rainbow waves that painted her nursery in colors no pure celestial child had ever displayed. She was unique. She was beautiful. She was ours. And as I stood there with my human husband beside me and our hybrid daughter between us, I realized that this strange, unconventional, absolutely perfect family was the future I had been fighting for all along. Not perfection, not purity, not isolation, but love, adaptation, survival through change. The last heir of the celestial dynasty would carry human DNA in her veins. She would grow up speaking 2 languages, embracing 2 cultures, bridging 2 species. She would be everything our ancestors never imagined and everything our future needed. And I couldn't wait to see what she would become.